Thank you for watching my webinar. My name is Shane and this is Money Making Webinars. My goal in this video is to teach you how to charge more for your webinars. Now, a lot of people have a problem transitioning from the free webinars to paid webinars. And I'm going to show you some strategies that you can implement starting tonight into actually making more money with your webinars. So the first thing we need to talk about is what the purpose of a free webinar is. There's a couple things. The first purpose of your webinar is to establish a bit of a rapport with your audience, to get them to know you, to get them to trust you, and to also qualify yourself as an expert in your field. So that's the reason, one of the reasons why you give a free webinar. A second reason, and just as important of a reason, is that you want to be able to sell your other product, your other webinar, to your audience. So that is, I would say that is probably about 75% of your webinar. I'm not saying that you can't teach people during this webinar, like you're going to make it valuable as well. But the primary reason, and people know this, why they're on their webinar is they want to learn something. And if you could teach them something on that webinar and you want to accelerate it, then you can charge them. So what do I mean by that? If you offer a webinar for free and they're there and you're teaching them a few things and it takes you about an hour, let's just say, to do the presentation, by the end of that webinar, you should be able to have enough value in that webinar that when you introduce a new product, you could say, you know what? I showed you a bunch of things. I showed you a bunch of tools that I use during this webinar. But if you want to use these same tools, or if you want to accelerate and go 2 times, 3 times, 4 times faster than you ever have, then you need this next webinar, which might be an accelerator webinar, might be how to increase your sales, how to double your income, all that kind of stuff. But it has to be valuable to the audience that's watching this webinar. And my suggestion to you is to make that webinar at least $1,000. Now, there's going to be some of you that are going to say, well, these people can't afford it. The people, my audience, they can't afford it. You don't know that. You absolutely don't know that. I've paid for webinars before. I've paid for courses that were as high as $1,000, if not higher than that. And because I saw the value in it, it was no problem to pay it. Credit card, whatever it is, monthly payments, that kind of thing. So don't judge your audience. Again, your goal for this webinar is to build up trust in your audience so that you could be able to make a presentation and say, look, I have a product here that's going to help you make more money starting in as little as 24 hours. Whatever your pitch is, that's what the whole purpose of this webinar is, and I can't emphasize that enough. So what I would suggest is when you get people to your free webinar, and we'll talk about that in another video, how to get them there, but you have an audience and your goal is to introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about the things that you went through to get to where you're at right now, and then you push the product. That's all you do, and you take as much time as you need to sell that product to your audience. I don't believe in having a presentation for an hour and then that's it. You can make your presentation 2 hours, 3 hours long. The idea, again, is you want your audience to be in a position where if they choose to close out of your webinar, they're going to regret it. They're going to feel like if I close this webinar, I'm losing out on something. So that's how you want to position your free webinar. I'm not encouraging anybody to have dozens of free webinars. I would suggest 3 at the max for every product launch. Every time you want to release a new product, have 2 or 3 webinars that are free, that are pushing that product. And you can even have a sample of that product in your free presentation. So if you're teaching somebody how to charge more, again, we'll give an example. I said you should be charging your customers $1,000 for your webinar. You need to be doing that. If you're charging them $100, $50, $97, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And remember, you've done all the work to get this presentation going. You've probably spent at least 20 hours doing it, and all you have to do is just back up and figure out how much you charge per hour. If it's $100 an hour and you spent 20 hours, that's $2,000 right there for your resources, for your knowledge, for everything that you're putting into that webinar. So don't sell yourself short by charging $7 just to entice some people to get in there. Honestly, if you're charging $7, $10, $20, people may not even show up to the webinar because it's nothing for them. It's a tax write-off, whatever it is. Focus on higher ticket items for your webinar and focus on the corporate industry, helping out the corporate industry. If you're trying to help people that are struggling to make money online, struggling to start a business, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be difficult. What you want to be able to do is find existing people that are actually doing something, but what you're actually doing is you're helping them get to the next level. So for me, for example, I'm targeting people that are, maybe they're making $100 a month, maybe they're making $500 a webinar. I'm seeking those people out and I'm challenging them to charge more money for their webinars. And once you have your first webinar valued at $1,000, so you're charging them $1,000, what you need to be able to do is imagine in your mind that you're putting so much value into that webinar that it's actually worth $5,000. So you have to put enough resources and effort into that webinar that makes it so that you could be comfortable selling it for $5,000 even though you're not selling it for $5,000. So I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying pretend it's worth more. I'm saying put more effort, put more resources into that webinar so that you can, if you had someone that was interested, you could feel comfortable enough to charge that person $5,000. And when you get to that point, you can now charge $1,000. And you can even tote that as, hey, this webinar is worth $5,000. And I was thinking about giving you guys a discount just because you're awesome and you're on this webinar. I'm going to let it go for $1,000. But if you do that, put your webinar at $5,000. Don't put it at $1,000 on your website, because then they're going to feel like they're ripped off because you said this was worth $5,000, they got it for $1,000. What you need to do is on your website, put it up for $1,000. So if somebody were to go to your website, they could buy it for $5,000. But this one-time offer, this person that is watching your webinar can actually pay for it for $1,000 and they save $4,000. So that's what you want to do. That's the mindset that you want to get your clients in. So where do you go from there? Where do you go from, now I have $1,000, what's your next price point? Your next price point should be between $3,000 and $5,000. I suggest $5,000. So again, what you do is you go back to the drawing board and you make the same presentation that you did for $1,000 and you said it was worth $5,000, now I want you to bump that up to $10,000. So again, in your mind, you're putting enough resources. It could be a one-on-one coaching session. It could be a phone call. It could be a Saturday afternoon webinar for 2 hours, whatever it is, but something in addition to the reason why they're buying the webinar for $10,000. And then you're going to sell it to them for $5,000. So that's how it works. So you got to get used to the idea of creating 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much value in your webinar. Okay, so now you have one product that's at $1,000 and you have a product that's at $5,000. Your next product is going to be worth $10,000. Now it doesn't have to be worth $30,000, but maybe it could be worth $15,000. So once you have your product valued at $10,000, anybody that is at your webinar, they've bought the $1,000 webinar, you can now say, hey, look, I have this webinar here for $10,000, but I'm giving it to you guys today only, in the next 15 minutes for $5,000. And then you have 2 products now that you could sell. One is at 5, one is at 10, but you're discounting it for today only at 5. So when people go to your website, they see a product for $1,000, they see a product for $5,000, they see a product for $10,000. And that's how you increase that. So I hope that helps. Hope it's not too confusing. If it sounds unrealistic, trust me, you just have to try it once and put that value, because really there's no difference between going from $100 to $500 and from $500 to $700 and then jumping up to $1,000. So why not start at $1,000? Put everything you got into that webinar so that it is so valuable, again, to whoever's watching it, that they want to take out their wallet and their credit card and they want to buy it because they have a need, they have a pain that only you can solve. So that is today's episode on how to charge more. This is basically part 2, more of an in-depth on how to actually charge your clients more for your website, for your webinar. So thanks for watching.